Hi, welcome to my video on the difference of two squares. Find the product of each. Let's find the product of each by, I'm going to do FOIL method for multiplying. First, x times x is x squared. X times negative 1, negative x. 1 times x, x. 1 times negative 1, 1. So, negative 1. And we add, these cancel out. So, FOIL, first, x times x, x squared. X times positive 2, positive 2x. Negative 2 times x, negative 2x. Negative 2 times positive 2 is, negative 4. Just be careful. Negative 4. First, outside, inside, last. And they cancel out because they're plus minus. And I go FOIL again. First, 9x squared. 3x times negative 5, negative 15. So it's outside. Inside is 5 times 3 is 15. And outside is 5 times negative 5, negative 25. And they cancel out to give you 0. So you get 9x squared minus 25. So that's multiplying these by FOIL. And we write down each of the answers here. But I'm just leaving that. I'll show you something now. You might say, why am I spreading this out? Well, I don't have to. So A is x squared minus 1. B is x squared minus 4. And C is x squared minus 25. And then also I left a gap. The gap is because if you look at each of these, the first term is x squared, and 9x squared. And the middle term, notice it's when you added these up here, you had a 0x. When you added these, that's a 0x, but I didn't write it in. When you added these two, I had a 0x, but I never put it in. So the middle term in all of these is a 0x, but I didn't write it down. And the last term was a negative 1, a negative 4, and a negative 25. And when you multiply these, notice when you multiplied this binomial times this one, we ended up with a binomial. The product, these are binomials. So that's a BI, they're binomials. And they're all binomials. So that's two terms, BINOMIAL, BINOM, they're binomial. Two terms. And the sign between the terms is a minus sign. The sign of the sign of this binomial is a minus. The sign between the terms. That's what I mean. The sign between. Let's write between so I won't make it too confusing. The sign between the terms in the binomial. When I say the sign, I'm thinking about there's a minus and a minus, but the sign between the two terms is a subtraction sign. If that be the case, let's go further. The product is a binomial. Okay, we can see that because we have two terms. The first term is x squared, and 9x. That first term is what we call a perfect square. It's a square. Like 3 squared is 9. 9 is a perfect square. And the last term is a 1, even though it's a minus. We'll ignore the minus. It's a 1 times 1 is a 1. A 2 times 2 is a 4. 5 times 5 is a 25. So the last term is a perfect square. Just ignore that. the sign between the terms is a minus sign or subtraction, whatever you want. Subtraction or minus. We could say minus. Same thing. That means when we look at this, each product is what we call the difference. And the difference, when we say difference, we mean subtract. Is the difference of two squares. So notice that's the difference of x squared, and 1 is a 1 squared. That's the difference, that's the subtraction sign between x squared and, so that's an x squared and a 2 squared. So that's an x squared subtract 1 squared. And so that's a 3x being squared subtract 5 squared. So there, 1 is 1 squared, 4 is 2 squared, and 9x squared is the same as 3x being squared, 3x times 3x, and the 25 is 5 times 5. So these two terms at the beginning and the end of this binomial, these terms are perfect squares. So we call this the difference of two squares. Each term, first and last, is a perfect square. So the difference of two squares. It's not very important, but you'll see it over and over and over again. If you recognize it now and know what it's called, then it helps later on when you review it again. More and again, review it again means it's putting it in your head and you're going to remember it better. Note A, B, and C above. A, which is this, B is this, C is this. The same terms in each polynomials are opposite signs. So notice that we have x plus 1, x minus 1. They're the same two terms, x and 1, separated by a plus and a minus. They're the same two terms, x and 2, separated by a plus and a minus. They're the same two terms, 3x and 5, separated by a plus and a minus. So when that happens, when you multiply, if you think about it, just watch. When you take a 2x plus 3 and you multiply by 2x minus 3, because they're the same two terms separated by a plus and a minus, I can go first and last, and get 4x squared minus 9, because when I do the outside, I get a 6x negative. When I do the inside, I'll get a positive 6. Outside, negative 6x, inside is 6x. So that gives you 0. If you notice it. And it works. Difference of two squares. It's the same terms when you multiply and get a binomial, difference of two squares. The pattern for the difference of two squares, let's see. Watch. Do the same thing again, but I'm using A and B this time. First is A squared. Outside, negative AB. Inside, B times A is the same as A times B. Last, negative B. Oops, that's a minus. Positive times negative is a negative. And what happens to the middle terms? They cancel. So that's A squared minus B squared. So notice, they're the same terms separated by a plus and minus. Middle terms cancel out. This is called the difference because you're subtracting. It's called the difference because you're subtracting of squares. A squared, B squared. So A squared plus B squared is the difference of two squares. So if you follow that pattern that I just showed you, just this one and one on the previous page, because they're the same terms separated by a plus and a minus, I can, and I'll do it, multiply the first term, x times x, and multiply the last term. You get the negative 36. So x squared minus 36. And if I want to fill in here, I can. So remember, the outside is a negative 6x, and the inside is 6x. And what happens when you add? They cancel. So you get that. But if you want to multiply by FOIL first, outside, inside, last, go ahead. But if you recognize same two terms separated by plus and minus, you can automatically go product of the first, product of the last. And same terms separated by plus and the minus, product of the first, x squared. Product of the last, negative 81. Because the outside and inside cancel out. First terms, 4x squared. Last terms, minus 49. Perfect. Why? Because they're the same terms separated by plus and minus. So the outside is a negative 14x. The inside is 14x. They cancel out. Outside, 9x squared. Sorry, inside. Outside, negative 1. Are they the same terms? Yep. 3x, 1, 1. Separated by plus and minus. So the outside is 3x. Inside, negative 3x. They cancel out. Same terms, 3x squared, 3x squared. Why? Yep. Separated by plus and minus. So first terms, 9x to the fourth. Last, negative y squared. Because the outside and inside, when you add, will cancel out. And the same here, same terms. Yep. A7, subtract 2 plus 2, separated by a plus and minus. So multiply the first two. You get a 9, you get a 9. An A to the 14. When you multiply these, you add your exponents. When you multiply those two, you get a negative 4. And again, the outside is 2a to the 7. The inside, negative 2a to the 7. And when you add those, you get a 0, and the 0 is in there. So remember, that's understood to be what? A14 plus 0x, 0a to the 7 minus 4. When you add these, you get a 0, and there's a 0a to the 7, which is not written in. So the final answer is a to the 14 minus 4. If you multiply first and last, you'll get the answer, because the outside, inside cancels out. Yep, pattern. That's a pattern for the difference of two squares. You'll see it again and again later. And to reinforce that, which binomial is the difference of two squares? Difference of two squares means you got a subtraction sign and you got both first and last term squares, perfect squares. And criteria for that is the first and last terms are perfect squares. There's only two terms, first and last. It's only two. You can't say a perfect difference of two squares is you can't say x squared plus 3x plus 4. That's a perfect square and that's a perfect square, but it's not the difference of two squares because this is extra. And here we go. And the binomial has a subtraction sign. Can't have a plus sign. So if you think of it, that's as x times x, that's 2 times 2, but that's the sum. We got to have a subtraction sign. So it's no, it's not. It's the sum of two squares. That's a perfect square. That's x times x. That's 9 times 9. So that's the difference of two squares. That's why, because it's x being squared and it's 9 being squared. That's the difference of two squares, x squared, 9 squared. This is 16, that's a 4x, and a 4x, that's a subtraction sign. But this is a 3, and the 3 is not a perfect square. That is in terms of what two numbers multiply to give you 3. Well, they're irrational, we'll handle that later, but they're not good numbers. They're not integers. So we say no. 25a squared is 5a and a. 9b squared is 3b and 3b. That's a perfect square and that's a perfect square. 5 squared, 3b squared. And it's a subtraction sign, so that's a yes. 4a squared, x to the fourth, is x squared squared. And 1 is 1 squared. And that's the difference of 2 squares. So that's a yes. Because that's a perfect square, x squared times x squared. And that's a 7y being squared. Not square root of 49 is a 7. And square root of y squared is a y. Square root of 100 is a 10. But that's a plus. That's a plus. So that's no. That's called a sum. That's the sum of 2 squares. So just looking at it for the pattern. And again, if you want to, I got this whole set of videos coming on factoring, so I won't do the factoring here. I'll wait till I get to those videos on factoring to drive home how this comes back to you again, and again. And that brings us to the end of this video. And if you like my video, click on the like button. If you're not a subscriber and you want to be, click on the subscribe button. And if you want, click on the notification bell because there's more videos coming. And write a comment if you wish. If you're a subscriber, write a comment. And if you want to visit my math website at mathfullyexplained.com, and you get 3 sections information. The first one is on me, my degrees in teaching experience. Second one is on the teaching strategies you're going to use to help you learn your math. And most important, you have the section on content, which has the topics and the number of videos on the topics that I want to have online. The black content, the black font is what's online already, and the red font will be the topics that I'll be developing in the near future. And the topics will be done in lower grades, pre-algebra, up to Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, going along with, if you're in grade 8, you can follow all of my videos from grade 8 to grade 9 to grade 10 to grade 11 and get into grade 12. And if I take the urge, I can do the calculus and the pre-calculus. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.